Erev Tov, good evening. We are on page 325 of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy's Mekor Chaim. I believe that yesterday we stopped at Halacha Yud Aleph. In Halacha Yud Aleph we mentioned that on each night of Chanukah you recite 3 blessings. The first, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu da'hadik ner Chanukah, or some say da'hadik ner shel Chanukah. The second blessing that we recite, Sha'asa nisim lavotenu b'yamim ahem b'zaman hazeh. And the third blessing is Shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lezaman hazeh. And this blessing we recite it only on the first night, unless someone forgot to recite Shechianu on the first night, and then they can recite it on whichever other night of Chanukah they remember, specifically during the time of candlelighting. So it's not a free-for-all, it's not whenever you remember on Chanukah, but whenever you remember during the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles. That brings us to Halacha Yud Bet, on what we do from the second night and on. B'layla Sheni, on the second night, Umimenu ve'elach, and every subsequent night of Chanukah. Mevarech shte brachot, you recite 2 blessings. Lehadlik, the blessing on lighting Chanukah candles. V'sha'asa nisim, and he who did miracles. Shekol yom na'asa bo nes hashemen meshech shomanat hayamim. Because even though before we started the shiur, in our introduction we were debating why we light 8 nights, why we light instead of 7 nights, meaning really the miracle only is a 7-night miracle, not an 8-night miracle. Nonetheless, according to halakha, so out of the realm of Agadah, now in the realm of halakha, sorry Yitzchak, it took a second to remember. In the realm of halakha, there are 8 nights, and because of that, there are 8 candles that we recite brachot on, and we make a blessing of Sha'asa Nisim because every one of those nights correspond to a night of the miracle. V'kach noagim, and that's the custom. V'achei shehidlik ner rishon shu ikari. Sorry, I think I skipped here. And after you light the first candle, which is the main mitzvah, the first candle, because after you light one candle, you've already fulfilled your basic Chanukah obligation. Omer hanerot halanu. We recite this sentence of hanerot halanu, these candles which we lit. Hanerot halanu kodeshem, ve'en reshut l'shtamesh behem otam bilvad. We're not allowed to use them. They're only there for us to see them. V'kach nohagim, and that's the custom. Umi shenoheg le'omro acharei hadakat kol hanerot. And anyone who is particular to recite the hanerot halalu paragraph after they finish lighting all the Chanukah candles, Shapir Dami. That is a much better way to perform the mitzvah, and that's what I do at home. So whereas I see some people who begin to say Hanerot Halalu as soon as they light one candle, I don't do that. Rather, I wait until after I finish lighting all the candles, and then I say Hanerot Halalu Kol Hashem. And I think that it makes more sense in general, again, to not do anything else and just focus on the lighting of the Chanukah candles. Dinei mi sheshachach v'yidlik b'lo baracha shekatvu acharonim. All of the halachot, as Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, that the Acharonim mention of a person who lit the Chanukah candles and they didn't make any beracha at all. Hishmatnu mipnei she'enam mitzvahim. We omitted those halachot because they're not commonplace. They're not regular occurrences. Sheken en shum adam shocheach me'olam barachot ner Chanukah. There is nobody in the world who lights the Chanukah candles and forgets to recite a blessing over them. It's an interesting halakha here. There are all kinds of halachot mentioned by the Chaonim about a person who forgets to recite the blessing on the Noat Chanukah. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, it's not commonplace enough for me to include it in a concise book of halachot. I think here you learn 2 things. One is that even people who are fulfilling the mitzvah of Chanukah on a very basic level, there are all kinds of mitzvot you can forget. You can forget to count Sivirat HaOmer one night. You can forget to all kinds of things. One thing that people won't forget is when they're about to light Chanukah candles, how many people actually light those Chanukah candles and don't ever stop for a second, or the people that's all around them, nobody stops them. Hey, you forgot to recite a bracha. So because of it, it says these halachot are not relevant. The second thing you learn from here is Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is telling you that only halachot which are relevant are important to review. This is something that the world of Am Yisrael today neglects to understand. And that is that halachot that are not relevant, you can ask those questions and deal with those situations when you finish studying everything else that you first are obligated to study. There's a story in the beginning of Chovat HaLevavot, Rabbeinu Bachye. Over there, he tells over a story of a chassid. Now, it's very interesting. Whenever Rabbeinu Bachye refers to a chassid, is there a particular chacham he's talking about? Is it a random chassid? Is he talking about himself? Rabbeinu Bachye there records, but it's a minhag among Talmidei Chachamim, that not to tell too many stories about themselves. So what do? They talk about, there was a chacham. It's a true story, but it's a story told about themselves, just not about themselves. When you get an email from somebody and everything starts with the word I, my, so then you know that these people can only think about themselves. And that is not the correct way. That is not the correct way to speak to anybody by being so arrogant. So Rabbeinu Bachye records the story of a student who came to ask the Chacham a question. In the laws of Gitin, Badinim she'enam mitzuyim, in an area of halakha which is not a regular occurrence, not a normal occurrence. And this chassid denigrated the student, called him out on it. He said, I've been studying Torah for 35 years, and never have I had a spare moment in my life to waste by asking a nonsensical question like yours. So essentially what the entire world of yeshivot today is built on is understanding, asking questions, answering answers that are completely irrelevant to daily life. The Rabbeinu Bachye completely dismisses this as any normative way to study Torah. We don't have enough hours in the day to waste time studying Torah like you. Period. If the world would focus on the parts of Judaism that are practical, that are relevant, we'd have a much more educated Jewish community. And there's two reasons. People, first off, they run away to areas like in the Talmud that are not relevant because that's the only area where those rabbis are able to teach anything in the first place. But oftentimes you have people that run away to different realms. They want to go study, how to fly in a magic carpet in Judaism. The reason why? Because you go to shiur and halakha, and it requires from you to change the way you live your life. It requires from you to think about what you need to do. It requires you to follow a certain set of rules. When you go to a shiur and all they tell you about is the different sefirot and what the world is and where the world of your tefillin is going to be, so you leave the shiur, wonderful class, I don't have to do one thing. It doesn't change anything in the way I live my life. Of course people like to study those things. Says Rabbeinu Bachye, it's an important thing to study halachot that are relevant. I cannot tell you how many times when I was with Rav Peretz, he would give a shiur and he would just say, let's skip this chapter, it's not important. I mean, this area of halakha will never come up in your life. And whereas that might sound unusual to some people, it's really not unusual to those who say, I have a limited amount of time on this earth and I can only study the things that I really need to know. And when I have time later in life to study the things that I don't really need to know, I'll study those things too. Kumoken, also, we also omitted din haroeh shemvarech shasani sim v'shechiyanu im lo hidlik ve'en b'da'ato la'adik sha'af hu eno matzui. There's another halakha Maran mentions Shulchan Aruch about a person who's in a place where he cannot light Chanukah candles for whatever reason, and he walks by another Jewish person's house and he sees through the outside of their door or through whatever, through their window, he sees Chanukah candles. And in that kind of situation, he recites the blessing "She'asa nisim lavotenu b'yamim hem b'zman hazeh" on another person's Chanukah. Says Rabbi Chaim, this is such an uncommon occurrence that there's no reason for me to codify this as halakha inside of my book. It's going to be a waste of paper to discuss it. If we would continue Rabbi Chaim David Halevy's letter, way of thinking here, you would really find yourself in a situation in which there are so many Jewish books that are simply a waste of paper. But I don't want to discuss that tonight. Rather, all you need to take is a trip to your local Jewish bookstore and look around the shelves and say, which of these books would Am Yisrael be able to survive without? And then you have the answer to your question. That's a lot of trees. It's a lot of wasted paper and ink in people's finances. Page 326. By the way, Shlomo HaMelech warns us in Mishlei, be careful, my son, not to write too many books. It's a teaching for a different time. הלכה י"ד, יתחיל להדליק בלילה ראשון הנר היותר ימני. On the first night of Chanukah, you begin lighting the rightmost candle. לפי צורת עמידתו מול פני המנורה. So how do you determine which is right? Is it the right when you look at it or right when you're on the other side of it? So when you want to determine the right side of the Chanukah, you're looking at your Chanukah. Looking at your Chanukah, your right hand. Yes? That's the first night of Chanukah. ובלילה שני, on the second night, כשיוסיף נר אחד סמוך לו, when you add another candle next to it, יתחיל ויברך על הנוסף. You always light the newest candle, the additional candle, never the main candle. It's a very unusual halakha. And I'll tell you the truth is, I know that all the poskim say it, so I'm not arguing, but it never really sat well with me. In every other scenario, you light that which you do that which you're obligated first, and then you add additions. Here, you're always blessing on the additional light. The reason he gives here, שהוא יותר שמאלי כדי להפנות לימין. It's the most left candle, and the reason you do it is so that you can always do things. Go over there. I'm asking you to please sit over there. Take your cookies, take your crayon. You go sit over there. Thank you. That you always want to go towards your right. So everything that you're doing, you're going towards the right. וכן בלילה שלישי, and also on the third night, כשיוסיף עוד אחד סמוך לשני הנרות הראשונים, when you add the third candle, which is to the left of the other two candles, יתחיל בנוסף, you again light the additional candle. ובו יתחיל הברכה, and that's the candle you start the blessing with, ואחר כך יפנה לצד ימין, וכן בכל לילה. And therefore you always find yourself, on every night, lighting in the direction towards the right. נמצא, it turns out, שתמיד מברך על הנוסף. You always light the additional candle, and here he gives a different reason. So not just for the reason that you want to light in the direction of the right, also another reason, שהוא מורה על הנס. It actually shows you the miracle. שהרי בתוספת הימים נתווסף הנס. Every new day made the miracle greater. So the fact that on day 3 we still have oil is a greater miracle than on day 2 we had oil. The fact that we had oil on day 8 and it was still lighting is much greater of a miracle than the fact that we had oil on day 2. And because of that, this is the reason that we always begin with the candle that's on the left. That's the most, that candle is the one that signifies the miracle the most. Avinam Sudi, come get all your coloring stuff and your food and go sit on this table right here. Okay? Do you want to sit here? Do you think you can be quiet when you sit here? Come, show me. Good job. Tedvav. Be'erev Shabbat, on the eve of Shabbat, madikim ner Chanukah tchila. We first light the Chanukah candle. Ve'achar kach ner shel Shabbat. And only afterwards we light the Shabbat candle. Umvarech alehem k'mo bechol. And we recite the same blessings that we would do on any other weekday. Af al pi shemadikim ba'od hayom gadol. Even though we still light the candles when it's middle of the day. So on Friday, if I'm going to light the candles before I light my Shabbat candles, so give me the example time when Shabbat starts. Shabbat starts at, candle lighting is 4:20. So that means that Shekiyat HaChama is 4:38. Which means that at 4:19 I'm lighting my Chanukah candles. At 4:19, it's smack in the middle of the day. The sun is out. And I'm still reciting all the blessings as if I was lighting on Friday night itself. Just color, but color is separate from each other, okay? That's okay. So you'll do what you do every night, okay? You learn with me, okay? Thank you. ועל כל פנים מתפלל מנחה קודם, כמבואר לקמן סעיף ל"ג. Nonetheless, you still want to make sure that you always pray mincha before you light your Chanukah candles, like we're going to explain in section 33. So on Erev Shabbat, we always light Chanukah candles before we light Shabbat candles. It's very important to make sure what we're going to discuss. ויכול להקדים הדלקתה מפלג המנחה ולמעלה. You're able to light Chanukah candles even earlier than that. Plag HaMincha is earlier in the day. ובלבד שייתן בשמן עד שתחלה רגל מן השוק. As long as you have enough oil to last that half an hour window after 3 stars come out. Remember that we discussed last night? The half an hour window of when the people stop walking in the marketplace. So it doesn't make a difference what time you light. Right before 4:19 you light. But let's say that Shabbat, then the 3 stars come out at 5:20. I'm just going to pretend. That means that your candles that you light at 4:19, they can only burn out at 5:50. And if your candles by 5:50 are still lit, then you fulfill the mitzvah. And if not, really it could be a problem. והוא שיעור חצי שעה אחרי צאת הכוכבים. ופלג המנחה הוא שעה ורבע קודם הלילה. פלג המנחה is 1:15 before nightfall. מעתה, ביום שישי שבדין בעוד יום, when you light candles on Friday in the daytime, היינו תוך שעה ורבע לפני הלילה, you're lighting 1:50 before nightfall, הוא פלג המנחה, that's פלג המנחה, ולכן יצמצם להדליק נר חנוכה ממש לפני נר שבת. And therefore you should try to light your Chanukah candles as soon as you can, as late as you can, meaning right before you light your Shabbat candles. וצריך לתת בשמן שתדליק חצי שעה אחרי צאת הכוכבים. And you must put enough oil so that it will last for half an hour after 3 stars come out, which is a 5:50. Well, that's a whole later time of the day. וכן המדליק נרות, ואם אין לו כל כך שמן או נרות גדולים, יקפיד על כל פנים שאחת מהן תהיה דולקת כשיעור הזה. If you don't have enough oil, you don't have enough candles, you have to make sure that at least one of those oil candles or one of those wax candles will last all the way until the time of half an hour after 3 stars come out. So now let's explain what we just read. On a normal night of Chanukah, you are able to light your Chanukah candles when 3 stars come out, and your candle has to light for half an hour, and we've mentioned before that even though the ideal mitzvah is oil, that really you can light with any candle, and therefore you could use your regular Chanukah candles that you buy in the store, and they hopefully should last for half an hour. By the way, you should try. Try one, just to make sure that it actually lasts for half an hour. You might be surprised. And then try 8 of them together next to each other and see if they still last for half an hour, because they give off heat to each other and they melt each other faster. But let's pretend. How many people here have candles or own candles that will last for 1.5 to 2 hours?
Tea lights.
How long do tea lights last?
The ones I have 3 to 4 hours.
Good.
Yes.
So then you should light on Friday that is Chanukah, you should light tea lights instead of regular Chanukah. Who needs the Chanukah? You don't need it. Line up a row of tea lights, and that's what you're going to light.
Really? I don't have to put on. Oh, okay.
It's that much better, because the candles that you have are most likely not going to last 2 hours. Correct?
No.
I don't think I've ever seen Chanukah candles that will last that long. Even nice big ones are still going to burn out quicker than that. Now tell me about those thick white Shabbat candles that people light. You know, the tall ones that they get in a box. How long do those last?
Also about 2 hours.
2 hours? Okay, so maybe if you use those candles for Chanukah candles, you can also get away with lighting them. But most likely, if you're using a Chanukiah that takes candles, it's not going to hold those white candles anyways. And therefore you want to make sure that at least for the Friday that you light Chanukah candles, you use the candles that will fulfill the mitzvah. If not, if you just use regular Chanukah candles, you will not fulfill the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles, period. And that's why I encourage people over and over and over again. Light oil, light oil, light oil. But if you can't light oil, light big candles, light big candles. Don't light regular Chanukah candles. They're good for every day of the week except for Chanukah. במוצאי Shabbat, on Saturday night, אין מבדילין בין החנוכה we're not allowed to use the Chanukah candles for Havdalah. Yeah, you can't put the Chanukah candles together and use Havdalah. Because you're not allowed to use the light. And the only candle you're allowed to use is one that you're able to enjoy the light from. So you cannot use Chanukah candles for Havdalah. That's a simple halakha. Now, if you had some kind of shamash with 2 wicks, that could be, but it's not a Chanukah candle, and therefore it's not a problem. Now, we mentioned earlier that there's a different custom about lighting Chanukah candles in the synagogue. So listen to this. On Yud Chet, in the bottom of page 326. Madlikim ner Chanukah b'Beit HaKnesset kodem Havdalah. We light Chanukah candles in the Beit HaKnesset before we do Havdalah. In order to delay Shabbat's end as much as we possibly can. That's a very unusual reason. We light candles before Havdalah so that we can keep Shabbat around for as long as possible while we light candles on Shabbat. Does that make sense? So why do Havdalah before? I mean, this is the reason. It's not made up. Let's read this together. The footnote 40. כך כתב מרן הבית יוסף. הטעם בשם שו"ת תרומת הדשן. This reason that we try to delay Shabbat from leaving is written by Maran the Bet Yosef in the name of the Trumat HaDeshen. Ula'aniyut dati, says Rabbi Chaim Halevy, but to my humble understanding, nira tam nosaf, there appears to be a different reason. She'im yadliku nerot Chanukah, that if you light Chanukah candles, levasof, at the end of tefillah, umiyad yima'u kol adam lebeito, and everyone, what do? You Leilun Shabbat, you light Chanukah candles, and everybody runs out the door to go home after Shabbat. En kan shum pirsumei nisa. There is no publicization of the miracle here. At the very least, they can light before Havdalah. So for those few minutes that everyone's doing Havdalah, there is some kind of Pilsumei Nisa that happens while the candles are lit. And this is very similar to what we write in section 32, where we're going to discuss all about why we light Chanukah candles in the Beit HaKnesset in the first place. So let's just say this way that there's a minhag in the Beit HaKnesset to light before Havdalah. And even though Maran quotes the Trumat HaDeshen, and Maran says the reason is to delay Shabbat from leaving as much as possible, Rabbi Chaim David Halevy gives a much more plausible explanation. That is that in order to have some kind of Pilsumei Nisa, you want to make sure that you light candles before everybody runs out the door. Back to the top of the page, meaning above the line. Ulinyan hadaka b'bayit, and in regards to lighting candles in the house, nechleku hadeot v'minhagim, there are many opinions and customs. Yesh madikim lifnei Havdalah v'yesh ifcha. There are some who light candles before Havdalah, and some who light candles after Havdalah. Unhara unhara ufashteh, and either way you go, it's okay. Look here in footnote 41. Well, we'll get to footnote 41. והדרך המובחרת היא, the best way to do it at home, הוא להבדיל תחילה, to first do הבדלה, ואחר כך להדליק, and then to light Chanukah candles, וכך הוא מנהג ירושלים, and that is the custom of Yerushalayim. Let's see here in 41. המחלוקת מפורסמת. It's a famous מחלוקת. עיין ברמה, look in the רמה. ובנושא כללים על שולחן ערוך. Look at all the commentaries in the שולחן ערוך. ומה שכתב הוא הסכמת מרן החידה, ברכי יוסף, ומחבר ומאור אצבע. And this opinion is of the opinion of the Chida. And then the 42, הסכמת רוב גדולי הפוסקים. Most of the poskim understand the other way, that you should first do Havdalah and light Chanukah candles. ורואה בשדה חמד מערכת חנוכה. I don't own a set of שדה חמד. But Bezat Hashem, one day I'll be able to get my hands on a set of שדה חמד. If you look in the שדה חמד, in the section of Chanukah, שהעתיק חבל נביאים מרבני האחרונים שהסכימו כן. He brings a whole group of חכמים that agree to first do Havdalah and then light Chanukah candles. V'yesh shekatvu sheken dat gam gdolei harishonim. Some say it's even the opinion of the greats of the Rishonim, Haravad, Rabbeinu Chananel, ve'od Ravad, Rabbeinu Chananel, and others. So the bottom line is that the minhag seems to be to first do Havdalah and then to recite the blessing on Chanukah candles. Does anybody here have a different minhag they do at home? I think pretty much is what everybody does. Now, when Sephardim use this phrase, minhag Yerushalayim, it's a very tricky phrase. One day, I will give a shiur, one day, all about this phrase, minhag Yerushalayim. And it's how it's been used and abused in the Sephardic community over and over and over again to force people of other customs into conformity. It's a very, very interesting phrase. This is the custom of Yerushalayim. It's known throughout the Sephardic world at least. The way the Sephardic Jews read the Sefer Torah, that tune, what do we call that tune? So there's the way Moroccan Jews read Sefer Torah. What do we call the Moroccan tune? The Moroccan tune. What do you call the Yemenite tune? The Yemenite tune. What do you call the tune of all of Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon? What do you call that tune?
Mizrahi?
It's called Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi, that's what they call it, Yerushalmi. Also, Chazanut is broken up this way. There's Moroccan, there's Yemenite, and then when it comes to the Sephardim around Israel, it's called Yerushalmi. Now, obviously, those Syrians among us will get offended that I just dub them in the same category as Iraqis and Egyptians, Chas v'shalom. But they are all part of a similar style of tefillah. Don't worry, the Moroccan rabbis had their own axes to grind. I heard a recording from a Moroccan rabbi who said that the makamim of the Sephardim in those countries, they're terrible makamim, they hurt your ears. Only the Moroccan makam, it sounds like water and a lullaby. Everybody in the ears that they're used to. Everybody is used to hearing something else. There's no right or wrong way to do these tunes. Nonetheless, this word of minhag Yerushalayim, wherever Sephardim were, wherever they were, whatever Jews did in Yerushalayim meant a tremendous amount to the Sephardic community. The Sephardic community, unlike its counterparts, was never divorced from Eretz Yisrael, ever. There never was a period in its history where it didn't have an active relationship, it didn't have travel back and forth to Eretz Yisrael, but more than that it ever lost some kind of appreciation towards Eretz Yisrael. And because of that, when you tell the Jew, in Yerushalayim, we do X, Y, and Z, sign me up, that's what I'm going to do also. I don't care where I live, I want to be like a Jew in Yerushalayim. The problem is that this phrase minhag Yerushalayim may mean that's what Sephardim do, but do you really believe that at any given point in time that the Jews in Yerushalayim, especially the Sephardic ones, agreed on one way to do anything? Can you imagine, like, all over the world Jews fight except for in Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim there's one minhag Yerushalayim. And this leads to many chachamim to write, there's most famously a rabbi that I merited to study by a little bit. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Toledano. Should live and be well. He has a 4-volume series of books called Divrei Shalom Ve'emet, in which he essentially, respectfully, declines every one of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's attacks on Moroccan minhagim. He has also a beautiful 3-volume work, which could be expanded more. I'm not sure where he's going with it, but it's about Jewish history. Unbelievable books. He's a tremendous person to learn Torah from. He in Morocco grew up in a Moroccan home, grew up by a father who grew up in a Moroccan home where they only spoke Hebrew at home. He never spoke another language in his house in Morocco. 3 generations at least, that wasn't Hebrew. So this fallacy that Jews started speaking Hebrew in the last 70 years, it's exactly that. It's a fallacy. This is a language that was not a dead language, it was an alive language. The only people who it was dead for were the Jews who were dead to their Judaism in the first place. That's why Hebrew was dead to them also. But to those Jews who engaged in Hebrew texts and spoke Hebrew and wrote Hebrew and read Hebrew and prayed in Hebrew and did everything in Hebrew, Hebrew was the language they spoke. Rabbi Shlomo Toledano writes that instead of calling Eretz Yisrael the land of Minhag Yerushalayim, it would be more correct to call Eretz Yisrael, it's not his own chidush, but he writes very forcefully about this, that Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Lekuta'it, it's a land of collected customs. In different periods, there were sometimes more Moroccans in Israel, there were others more Iraqis, more Syrians, more whatever it is. And in different waves, Eretz Yisrael was influenced by different people. There were Turks at a time where the Ottoman Empire, every Golan, whoever was the majority, had what they called Minhag Yerushalayim. And to try to mush that all together into one standard Sephardic Minhag Yerushalayim is not only not acceptable, but it's inaccurate historically. And therefore, to compel people to abandon their minhag for what you have labeled minhag Yerushalayim is not always the correct thing to do. And he talks about this at length. And nonetheless, when you see v'kachu minhag Yerushalayim, that's second best for a Sephardic person too, and that's what Maran did in his house. So, you as Sephardi, here's what Maran says, that's what I do. The next best thing, that's what they do in Yerushalayim. And that's why Rabbi Chaim David Halevi writes here, v'kachu Minhag Yerushalayim. There's one other famous Minhag Yerushalayim that creates waves every year in the Sephardic community. Do you know what I'm talking about? Think about the summertime. There's a Minhag in the summertime.
To accept Shabbat 40 minutes early?
Okay, that's a later Minhag Yerushalayim, mostly among the Ashkenazim. That also makes problems, but not, and I understand why you say now in the summertime, but I'm talking about it happens once a year. One day a year. There's a fight among the Sephardim, and Minhag Yerushalayim is always invoked here. Talk to me about Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Yosef, tell me. Very good. Whether or not you're supposed to wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av morning, or you wait until Mincha to wear tefillin. And famously, Chacham Ovadia Yosef writes that it's Minhag Yerushalayim to wear tefillin and shacharit, and not to wear tefillin by mincha. And this led to tremendous waves, still leads to tremendous waves. We had a few friends that were in Israel, maybe in 2016, for a rabbinic conference in Yerushalayim. They went to pray in a Sephardic synagogue, and like all of them who were Sephardim outside of Yerushalayim, they wore tefillin by mincha, and not by shacharit. And when they came to mincha with tefillin, they were asked by the Gabbai of the Beit HaKnesset to please leave the Beit HaKnesset because they're in violation of minhag Yerushalayim. Now, when they later went to the rabbi of the Beit HaKnesset and showed him that the chief rabbi of the old city, in the generation before this one, was a Sephardi, and he wore tefillin on Mincha of Tisha B'Av, that didn't go over very well. Meaning, we're in the old city, and in the old city there's a minhag of the Sephardim to wear tefillin only by Mincha, not by Shacharit. So how did you throw us out of a Sephardic Beit HaKnesset in the old city of Yerushalayim for violating Minhag Yerushalayim when we just showed you that that wasn't Minhag Yerushalayim? And here you start to deal with influences of Kabbalah and different Sephardic communities and those in Israel, those outside of Israel. I'm not here to stick my head inside of this argument, but definitely I can tell you that this phrase of Minhag Yerushalayim becomes a hot topic in the Sephardic halachic community every year surrounding Tisha B'Av, every single year. Let's look on page 327. But what my wife mentioned, it's a good thing to know. In Yerushalayim, among the Ashkenazim in particular, they light Shabbat candles 40 minutes before Shabbat begins. Yes, so not 18 minutes like in other places, but 40 minutes. Now it's famous that Sephardim did not really accept this as anything binding on them. Harav Peretz always likes this minhag. He says, a nice thing. Imagine if every Shabbat my father is going to give this back to me. Always upset, running late to Shabbat. So it's true. Whether Shabbat starts at 4 o'clock or Shabbat starts at 8 o'clock, we're always somehow running into Shabbat, no matter what it is. Like we never have enough time to run into Shabbat. So we should just pretend Shabbat starts at 3 o'clock and then the whole year will be okay. But in Yerushalayim, at least 40 minutes before Shabbat, they were already ready for Shabbat. They're not running. 40 minutes before Shabbat started. The Baba Sali, Alav Shalom, would sit in his Beit HaKnesset 1 hour before Shabbat, wearing white, and he would just sit in his chair, waiting for Shabbat to start. 1 hour before Shabbat. Nothing to do. I'm just waiting for Shabbat. Why do I have to rush into Shabbat? I have to fall into Shabbat. And I know this because when I go to Yerushalayim to stay by my in-laws' house, they're very particular about this 40 minutes before Shabbat. Now let's be honest, even in the place where it's 18 minutes before Shabbat, are you allowed to do melacha? Are you allowed to do forbidden actions after the candle lighting happens? Absolutely. Candle lighting is like sweeping the floor. If you sweep your floor for Shabbat, does Shabbat start just because you already swept your floor for Shabbat? If you wash your dishes for Shabbat, it's a mitzvah to make your house clean for Shabbat. You wash your dishes for Shabbat. Does Shabbat start when you turn off the sink? The faucet? So, the Shabbat, when you light candles to prepare for Shabbat, does Shabbat begin when you light candles? It's another preparation of Shabbat. This one, legislated by our Chachamim. That's all. Shabbat begins when Shabbat begins. Shabbat begins at sundown, a moment before. Yeah, Tosefet Shabbat. I'm not here to stick my head in that detail. And therefore, after you light Shabbat candles, you can still do whatever you need to do until Shabbat starts. Now, are there women who have a minhag to accept Shabbat when the Shabbat candle is fine? I'm not. That's a minhag. I don't interfere with minhagim. I'm talking about halakha right now. So if you light candles 40 minutes before Shkia, how much more so that at 40 minutes, it's still definitely not Shabbat. You still have 40 minutes till the sun sets. So sometimes it happens. It's Yerushalayim. I'm there. And I know what time candle lighting is. I know what time sunset is. And I'm busy taking care of all the kids. I go shower for Shabbat. And as soon as I get in the shower, Achana, what does my mother-in-law do? She turns off the hot water. And mocks her, it's Shabbat already, Shabbat, get out. She knows, I know that you think it's not Shabbat, but it's already Shabbat, and the siren already happened, and Hashem will, I want to ask her forgiveness for giving her heart palpitations on Erev Shabbat. But the truth is that it's not Shabbat yet. It's a nice thing to start Shabbat. It's not Shabbat yet. It happened to me, I didn't get a chance to shower before Shabbat, so I still have 40 minutes till Shabbat starts. Halavai, on a regular Shabbat, I got it ready 40 minutes before Shabbat. I started preparations 40 minutes before Shabbat. It's another one where they say Minhag Yerushalayim, and that Minhag Yerushalayim is generally in the context of the Ashkenazi community of Yerushalayim, and not the Sephardic community of Yerushalayim. Page 327. HaChayavim b'hadlaka. So who's obligated in lighting Chanukah candles in the first place? In Halacha Yutet we say, Afilu ani, even a poor person, hamitparnes min tzedakah, who receives their livelihood from tzedakah, shoel o mocher kisuto, sells their clothing, their cover, or at least lends it out, meaning to get some kind of money for it. And he purchases oil to light his Chanukah candles. Mishum pirsum hanes, because of the importance of publicizing the miracle. Now let's just say very clearly, when he sells his clothing to go light Chanukah candles, how many candles is he buying for the whole Chanukah? Very good. Altogether, 8. 8. This person is buying one candle per night of Chanukah, as is the basic obligation of the mitzvah. If a person had money to buy 44 candles, and 44 candles is expensive. But imagine how poor a person has to be to not afford 8 candles, just for the record. I bought Chanukah candles today. Somebody needed candles, so I think you could buy them at Target or wherever else. I didn't get it there, but for a few dollars. How much is a Chanukah candle? A few dollars. You want to buy fancy ones from Israel? $15. How much are you going to buy for Chanukah candles? You want to buy oil candles? $30 for the whole 8. So you don't have enough money to buy only 8 candles. Think about how poor this person is. Now, I will tell you here, and I didn't look in the poskim, but I just want to share an idea that oftentimes when Chachamim talk, and I shared this in my Sunday class, when Chachamim discuss, I could be even shared it with you last week here. I don't remember anymore which shiur I say where. When Chachamim discuss that you sell even the clothing from on your back. Someone tell me which shiur I shared this in. What does this remind you of? Which Jewish contract? Marlene, was it Sunday or was it a different class?
I think it was Sunday.
Sunday. Okay, maybe that's why everyone doesn't know. What does it remind you of? Yes. What did I say? What was the answer? That's right. Where do we mention selling the clothes on your back? All of you who are married have made this promise. At least the men here.
By the ketubah.
Very good, by the ketubah. By the ketubah. In the ketubah you say that you'll pay the amount of the ketubah, that even the robe, the clothing on my back, I will sell in order to pay my ketubah obligation. Trust me, when it comes to divorce, nobody is as eager to fulfill the things they promised on the day of their wedding. And in fact, I don't know anybody who is particular about the halachot. All the things they promised in the ketubah, if they were that good of a person, then probably they shouldn't get divorced in the first place. But most likely, they're the type of people who made all kinds of promises on their wedding day, and then it came time to actually put their money where their mouth is, and good luck trying to find them. I mean, even from the clothing on my back, Arav Peretz in his book, Emet Yaakov, the laws of marriage in this chapter on ketubah is an exaggeration. You don't actually give away your clothing. When you're going to be naked in the middle of the street, you're going to give your clothing. It means pretty much, it's an expression. Everything that I have, I give in order to pay you back. Your clothing, you keep your shirt on. Don't hand away your shirt. I'm not telling you it's the same thing here, but it's reminiscent of that halakha. Chaf. Mi she'en yado maseged liknot ner Chanukah v'ner Shabbat. What if a person doesn't have enough money? Now this is in the days before they had electricity, so don't talk to me today, but it's an important halakha. A person who does not have enough money to buy both a candle for Chanukah and a candle for Shabbat. Why not candles for Chanukah and candles for Shabbat?
Chanukah that's falling on Shabbat.
But why does it say ner and not nerot?
Because the obligation is one.
For Chanukah, the obligation is one. What about for Shabbat?
Two.
The obligation on Shabbat is
2.
one.
No.
Two. Minimum two. We also say Ner Shel Shabbat.
One candle for Shabbat. There's a minhag to light 2 candles. Like you have a other idea to light 44 candles, but there's one candle for Shabbat.
Wait, I thought you said on Sunday that you have to light 2 to remember and to guard.
I was asked over there how many candles you should light for Shabbat. So there I said 2. But how many candles do you have to light for Shabbat? 1. You just have to have a source of light. That's it. So 1 candle for Shabbat or 1 candle for Chanukah. That's your choice between 1 and 1. But in general, you should know this is an important halakha. There are people who come around collecting money to live a lifestyle that is not according to halakha. I'll explain to you. People come around to collect money. I have a minhag in my family. I only eat matzah shmura, the handmade matzah shmura, the whole 8 days of Pesach, and so it's my minhag, you need to pay for it. You know, if you would come to me, the person I had a real story in my life. A person who came to talk to me, they need money for matzah and Pesach. I said, watch, how many children do you have? How many children do you have? I'm going to go buy you enough matzah to last you bli and harat till next year Pesach. How much does a box of 5 packages of matzah cost you today in one of these grocery stores? In Ralph's, let's say. How much does it cost you 5 packages of matzah the week before Pesach?
$10.
About $10? How many boxes of matzah do you think you need a day in a house? For 4 kids?
2.
2? So someone tell me the math. How much money I'm going to have to spend to buy this person? Let's say if I buy them 5 cases of matzah, they're going to be okay?
Yes.
So for $50, I can go to the store, but that's assuming it's not like Vaughn's, there's a loss leader, they're practically handing the matzah out to you for free because they want you to buy their overpriced gefilte fish and jelly rolls, whatever they sell over there. But this is I'm going to go buy $50 worth of matzah. That's 25 boxes of matzah. You, bli and hara, will be able to eat until Shavuot these matzot. And what the person tells me? I'm sorry, but I only eat shmura matzah. $50 is going to get me 1.5 boxes of shmura matzah. So it's my problem now that you decided you can only eat shmura matzah that's handmade. And so now you're paying $40 a pound for matzah. So now I have to pay for it? Or my community has to pay for it? Does that make sense to anybody? Here's the best part of the story. I told the guys, I'm not going to help you matzah. I'm going to help you get wine. And he needed a special hechsher, of course. So he came the next day. So I went to Rabbi so-and-so in a different neighborhood here in San Diego. And he gave me, at least for my Seder, he gave me 1 box with 3 shmura matzahs in it. They sell these special boxes for Pesach. 3 matzot just for the Seder. I said, no, so you have shmura matzah? He said, no, I'm still collecting for the shmura matzah. I said, why are you still collecting for the shmura matzah? You have now. He told me that the driver that drives him around San Diego, he takes 50% of everything you collect. And so he took from this person 1.5 of his 3 matzot. He made him open the box, break the matzah in half, and give him 1.5 matzot of his 3 matzot he had in the box. But I don't know what is evil if not that is evil. You take his money, 50%, he pays for his own hotel, he pays for his own food, he helps pay for the gas, and you take a matzah and a half from his box. They say once that Ibn Ezra, alav shalom, I don't know if it's true, but
It would be cheaper to stay in Israel.
Right, thank you, Rachel, but that's already a whole That's already a whole different conversation. But you're right. And think about how much, if you were broke, if you would have enough money to fly around the world, visiting every city in the world to go collect money, if you were broke. Someone one day will explain to you the math. I can barely afford to fly to Israel when I have money to fly to Israel. If I didn't have money to fly to Israel, how am I going to get to Israel? But let's leave it for a different conversation when it comes to Yichot Tzedakah. I was telling you about the matzah. What I was going to tell you? So bottom line, misken, he assumes.
You don't have to pay for somebody else's.
Yeah, I know. So he assumes that I'm going to have to help him to keep his standard of, it's not even halakha, his standard of Pesach, when really he could actually go a long way even in taking care of his family if he was just willing to follow the basic halakha. And listen, at this point in time, we can't choose. We don't have the luxury to be the strictest people in the neighborhood. And so, Rachmana litzlan, following the Shulchan Aruch this year is just going to have to be enough for us. What can we do? Miskenim. What are we going to have to do? The same thing with Chanukah. So yeah, of course, 44 candles is exciting. But at the end of the day, if a person doesn't have money, so they light one candle per night. That's all. That's the mitzvah. They did the mitzvah of Chanukah. That's it. You fulfilled your mitzvah of Chanukah. How much is 8 yard-side candles in the store? Maybe $1 a candle? $1.50 a candle?
Yeah, $1.50
$1.50? Now I'll help you out. You want to be really Jewish? Those yard-side candles burn for 24 hours. You can buy the same candle and just keep lighting it every night of Chanukah. After an hour, the end of the day, how much could it possibly cost? So here, this question is really a theoretical question. You're choosing between Shabbat candle and Chanukah candle. Remember, one candle each. Yikneh ner Shabbat mipnei shlom beto. If you have to choose between one Chanukah candle and one Shabbat candle, you light a Shabbat candle because the peace in your home, which is the reason why we light the Shabbat candle, is more important than the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles. Do you understand that halakha? Lighting Shabbat candles, its whole purpose is to bring light into your home, not spiritual light, physical light, real light, so you can see what's going on in the house. And that brings Shalom Bayit. Our HaShamayim tell us it's more important to light your Shabbat candle and have peace in your home than to spend money on a Chanukah candle and fulfill the mitzvah. If you would just pause for a moment and take this message to everywhere else in Torah mitzvot, our HaShamayim are giving you an order of priorities. That Shalom Bayit, by the way, in America they say Shalom Bayit. Shalom Bayit means hello house. Shalom Bayit or Shalom Bayit means peace in the home. Once it's attached to another word, it can't be pronounced anymore Shalom. Shalom is on its own, a standalone word. Once you attach it, it's the Shalom Beto. It's going to be connected to the word Bayit, and therefore it has to be pronounced differently. But if you ever write, I've before written to someone, Shalom Bayit, SHLOM, and they send me back a correction that you don't know how to spell Hebrew, and so they'll send it back to me. That when you deal with Shalom Bayit, or you deal with lighting, doing a mitzvah, lighting Chanukah candles, whatever it is, which one that takes priority is the peace inside of your home. This is a message that Chachamim are teaching us through the lighting of Chanukah candles.
Isn't it also the mitzvah that you do more often than one that you do typically, rather than one that you do just once in a while?
You would think that that's the reason Chachamim would give, because you're correct, Marley.
So that's.
But it's not a reason that's given here. The reason that's given here is particularly that Shalom Bayit takes precedence over the mitzvah of Chanukah candles. Vim yesh lo l'shel Shabbat, ve'en lo ner Chanukah. If he has money for a Shabbat candle, but he doesn't have enough for Chanukah candles, v'yayin l'kiddush hayom, and wine for the daytime kiddush, yikneh l'ner Chanukah mishum pirsumei nisa. So between all of these priorities, Chanukah still takes precedence because of publicizing the miracle. V'hu hadin shener Chanukah kodem liyen havdalah. And for sure that the Chanukah candle, it takes precedence over wine for havdalah. Just think that through with me for a second. Why kiddush for the daytime? Why do we single out daytime kiddush? At night. Okay, so at night, you can fulfill your mitzvah of kiddush with bread. What about in the daytime?
So, during the daytime. And it's also just the beracha, there's no, it's not there like that. The day.
Okay.
You can make a charcoal. No?
You can make kiddush on charcoal.
To be an alcoholic shackle, as far as I know.
Yeah. So what state do we live in right now? What state are you in right now? California. Is California known for its vineyards?
Some.
We have some pretty famous vineyards in California. You don't have the right to make kiddush in California on anything else aside from wine or grape juice, if you do grape juice. But there is no beer kiddush, no vodka kiddush, no whiskey kiddush. Just be honest and don't do kiddush. Chamar Medina is a halakha that doesn't apply in the world. In Israel, the national beverage is wine. The respectable alcoholic beverage is wine. In the United States, I would argue also the same thing. Are there people who disagree? Of course there are people who disagree. But Haraperet's stance on halakha is we only make kiddush on wine, period. So nothing else to look at. There's no other kiddush. So, Isha madleket ner Chanukah. A woman lights Chanukah candles. What does that mean? Does a woman light Chanukah candles? If she lives alone, of course. Here, she's at home. Who would light Chanukah candles at home? Minastam, her husband. So what is he saying? Meaning, in this mitzvah, the wife, the mother, whoever she is, lights Chanukah candles for the whole family. She has the same mitzvah like everybody else. So her candle lighting can be for the whole family. She's also obligated in this mitzvah like everybody else. It's not a different obligation by women than it is for men. Shabbat Yochanan Kohen Gadol Chatcha Rosho Shel Rosh HaTzorim. That two things happened that women inspired in the story of Chanukah. The first is that they were part of the miracle of Chanukah. There was a decree against the woman in the times of Chanukah, among other decrees, that before her wedding night, she would have to be raped by the by the Greek general or hegemon, whatever you're going to translate that into English. And because of that, this led to many of the miracles of Chanukah. And then the daughter of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, she cut off the head of the enemy of the Jewish people. In footnote 45, he tells you again to look in Masechet Shabbat and then look at Rashi. We already discussed Masechet Shabbat and Rashi. If you remember, we discussed the Apocrypha and the literature that surrounds the story of Chanukah and how Rabbi Chaim David Levi has his doubts as to whether these stories actually have anything to do with Chanukah or not. I'm going to leave it as it is. Like I told you, the simple understanding of Av Sha'af Hen Hayu Bo'to Hanes is that women were saved in this miracle just like men were, and because of that, they're obligated in the miracle, in the holiday that celebrates the miracle just like men are. And therefore, Adam shekvar hidliku birech, a man who already lit his candles, he already said a beracha, yachol lachzor ulevarech benochuchuta. But he can go and light in her nochechut. What is nochechut? In her presence. What does that mean? Ben shu yadik bishvila uben shi tadik, kivan shi atzma chayevet. When you go do a mitzvah for somebody else, let's say he says, I don't know how to light Chanukah candles. Can you light Chanukah candles for me? You can do that because she's obligated in the mitzvah on her own. This is this is contrary to that which many, for example, Ashkenazim would believe by the mitzvah of Megillat Esther, that a woman have an obligation only to hear the Megillah, but not to read the Megillah. Therefore, if a man already read the Megillah, he wouldn't be able to go to a woman's house and read the Megillah for her with the same blessing that he would read for men. Here he's making a point that they have a same obligation, and therefore he can repeat this mitzvah for her in order so she can fulfill her obligation as well. In Halakha Chav Bet, we're going to discuss the category of chashu. What is a chashu? It's an acronym.
Important.
No, that's chashuv with the vet. Chet, shin, vav. It's a halachic term used to describe three types of people: cheresh, shoteh, v'katan. Someone who is not of sound mental state, I'm saying this because I don't know anymore what is the correct word to use here or not. A person who is unable to be in control of themselves at all. It's a person who has no dat. Yes? We're going to call them from now on a shote. Cheresh is a person who is deaf. And a katan is a person under the age of bar mitzvah. Now, the literature surrounding people who are otherwise deaf nowadays being able to hear is a great conversation to have. I'm not here to stick my head in that whether that changes the category. Halachically, these were people that were unable to communicate with others and therefore were exempt by our rabbis from mitzvot. So ner Chanukah sheidlika cheresh shoteh v'katan, sheidlika cheresh shoteh v'katan, lo asa klum. It doesn't count for anything. Ve'en shum chiyuv mutar lehem, because these people are not obligated in lighting Chanukah candles. Suma, what about a blind person? Is a blind person obligated in lighting Chanukah candles? Yes. Suma chayab hadaka. A blind person has an obligation to light Chanukah candles. V'im hu bebayit shacharim madikim mishatef imahem. And if he is in a home where someone else is lighting, he should fulfill the mitzvah with them. V'im nasui. And if a blind person is married, ishto madeket alav. It's better that his wife should light for him. V'im eno nasui. And what if he's not married? Someone else should help him light his candles. Of course, he needs the assistance, but he should not recite a beracha. Katan. Now we're talking about a young child. Katan shigia lechinuch. A child that reaches the age of chinuch. What is the age of chinuch? Of education for mitzvot. Right, so some say 9, 10, some say 6 or 7. There's different age range of... Really, the age of chinuch that you want to... That's not the same as the age of chinuch. The age of chinuch le-mitzvot. Really, the answer is, aside from the numbers that are given objectively, subjectively, there's an age. And most of the time in halakha, we don't just choose a number. Rather, we choose an age in which a child is able to understand something. So, for example, the Mishnah tells us that when a child knows lihitatef, you buy him tzitzit. When he knows to wave a lavan etog, you buy him lavan etog. When he knows how to do this, you buy him that. When he knows how to speak, you teach him Hebrew. There are all kinds of things that you have to teach a child as they become able to understand the things they're going to do. So the age of chinuch is quite subjective. There may be an objective age given by poskim, but you'll know when a child is old enough to really understand that they are obligated in a mitzvah. So a katan shigia lechinuch tzarich la'adik. A katan, a minor who has now reached the age of chinuch, let's say 10 years old. I'm just going to use that because it's a good number. A child that has reached the age of 10 now is obligated to light their own Chanukah candles. Obligated because they're obligated in the mitzvah of Chanukah? No. They're not obligated in mitzvah Chanukah. What are they obligated in? Their parents are obligated to educate them. Mitzvah chinuch. It's a different mitzvah. It's going to have a ramification in just a moment. According to the poskim, like us, the Sephardim, who say only one person lights Chanukah candles in the whole house. So what do you do with this halakha that a child has obligated to light their own Chanukah candle? And what are you saying? According to that, then all children in the house have to light Chanukah candles. So do you light one Chanukah per house, or do you light many of them for each child who's obligated? What's the answer? According to the Sephardim, medubar efu, we're talking about a situation, bekatan sheyesh lo bayit b'fnei atzmo, who has a home that's his own. V'lachen madik u'mvarech kevan she'ira lechinuch, and he lights his own candles because he's now reached the age of chinuch. What kind of 10-year-old child lives on his own? Yeah, tell me. A child in a treehouse, the Chanan says. A child in a treehouse, but that would be a very dangerous place to light Chanukah candles. Give me a real example of when a child may live alone at the age of 10. It's very possible, and it happens in many countries.
In orphanage, maybe?
Okay, so perhaps a child who has no parents and is living on their own. Okay, that's a case. Maybe not. Yeah, that's a case. I'll take that case. Give me another one. I'm thinking about a lifestyle. Let me give you this question. How could it be that in certain countries, people got married at the age of 13, the age of 14, the age of 15? Where on earth are you supposed to live? How are you supposed to get married, have a family, cook food? How do you do all that stuff when you're 13 years old? In which world is a 13-year-old able to handle all this on their own? Where do they buy a house? Where do they get money? How does that work? How did it work historically?
We live in a cortesia, like a courthouse.
Very
Not a courthouse, what do you call it? Courtyard.
Courtyard, very good. What do you call it? Cortija?
Cortija.
Very good. So you'll see this in any traditional Sephardic community, if it's going to be in Morocco. By the way, Yemen is a little different. Yemen had a very unique type of architecture, but also similar. And you can tell a Yemenite Jewish building by looking at the outside of the building. It looks different than any other building that you may have seen. But let's talk about Morocco, let's talk about Spanish Jewish communities, let's talk about Iraq, let's talk about Yerushalayim. If you've ever walked around Nachlaot, for example, in Yerushalayim, and you'll see that all the buildings are built in a shape of a... They're all in rectangles or squares. So I don't know if you can see this. But essentially, you'll have a building all around in a square, and there'll be maybe one gate or two gates that are locked, they're sealed. And everybody lives in a little apartment or a little room that's over here. And then this courtyard is shared by the entire family. So it's a family, there's a word for this in English. Not a nuclear family, I think there's a word for it. The whole extended family living together. And everybody shares this courtyard. So imagine this, you're a 13-year-old, you're getting married, presumably to your cousin from across the street. I don't know, from somebody that you know from the next compound over. It's not a very big Jewish community. And what does it mean you bring her home and you buy a house? It means that you've now been given the little newlywed apartment on the top floor of this corner of the complex. And where is your house? Everybody has a bedroom, but nobody has a house. You forget it's a Sephardic family. Nobody has privacy. So you have a door to your bedroom, but aside from that, you eat outside. You cook outside. You sleep inside. But everything else, you play games, you raise your children, you have your animals, everything is outside in this courtyard. And this is one family compound. So the thought of getting married, of cooking food, of doing laundry, it's a different... You say everybody has kids. So one day it's an aunt, I don't know what her name is. Aunt, this one is taking care of all the kids, and this aunt is cooking all the food, and this one is responsible. And then they take turns. The next day it's somebody else, and it's one big family that's being raised together. Not the American model of you get to turn to the age 18, you fly to the other side of the world, you go to university, you find some random person your parents don't like, you marry her over there, and you visit them every year on Thanksgiving, and then in the old age home before they die. That's the model of an American family, not the model of a traditional family in the Jewish community. You're talking about a person who has his own house, who's a child, meaning he was given his own house, his own room. That's what it would be in our definition, his own room. But not a room like in your house where you can burst in whenever you want, a room that's his room. He's responsible for that room. He locks the door to that room. He keeps the valuables in that room. You don't have access to that room. That's a room. It could be that some children in the world that we're in maybe are obligated to light Chanukah candles. And don't get ideas right now. I'm not actually suggesting children should be lighting fire in their room. I'm sharing with you a halachic concept, which is that it could be there are children that are old enough and their rooms are private enough that they may be obligated, I'm saying maybe, to look into this more, to light Chanukah candles, if not in their room, then in the doorway of their room facing the rest of the house. It's something to think about. But that's a classic case of where a child would have their own house. You know, when you look at old Jewish family models, it's a whole different world of problems. So let's be honest. Living with all your in-laws and all your aunts and uncles and all your cousins and all the brothers and sisters you don't want to live with, it's complicated. It has its own dynamics and its own politics. But there was a beauty in that world also. You were never alone. You never had to face struggles alone. Money was an issue that everybody dealt with. So everybody puts in a collective pot. It's not exactly socialism. Don't think of a kibbutz. But it's something where there may be more influential families. Harav Peretz grew up in a home like this. Harav Peretz's father had a compound like this, was his. And then in a corner of the compound, he had his yeshiva. And for his prize students, he had their own apartments up there. And for the students who didn't live with them the whole time, they had special Shabbat apartments where they would come and they would stay here and they would be part of the family. They would eat together. They would cook together. Harav Peretz remembers, he used to tell you about there was one of the Avrechim's wife, I'm borrowing a term, not Avrech, but one of his father's students' wives who she would sit him on his lap and read him stories when he was a child. And he doesn't remember, she would bake him special cookies. And my son, it was a hard world. She didn't have children for 10 years and this husband ended up marrying another woman to have children with her and didn't divorce his wife. And ultimately, the second wife had children. It's like a straight out of the Tanakh. Made him divorce the first wife. This first wife never able to get remarried again. Harav Peretz's family kind of took her in because where's she going to go? In the Middle East, you're divorced. Nobody's going to marry you, and your family probably doesn't want you back either. It's not a good world. It's not a beautiful conversation to have. Harav Peretz said that he every Shabbat, she would still read him stories and still bake him cookies, but she would cry all day and all night. All day, she would cry all day and all night. She really loved this husband at first. Now, Peretz always talks about how, even when he came to Israel, he kept a journal in which he would track this man and his family and his new wife and their children. And Peretz said that everything that happened to Eov, every single thing happened to this man. From his wife coming to Israel and divorcing him and the kids being estranged from him, he died alone with, he said, Yesh din v'yesh dayan. They said, if you love a wife, you don't leave her for something else. And Pelz was very adamant that this woman deserved the love and care of the first husband, and she shouldn't have been a second wife and then divorced. And he talks about it. This woman was a tzaddikat, that she really raised him as part of the extended family of his father's talmidim. There was a world where good things happened. You didn't hire babysitters. You didn't worry about people outside because the compound was yours. It was closed. Everybody was safe. It's a world that we'll probably never get back to, but it's an important one to study about when you study halakha and you try to understand things in the context of halakha. So what about this katan?
We need a biography after this, that sounds like.
I know Halavai, and she lived to 120, but someone has to, different people have interviewed him about different parts of his life, and if you're okay with Hebrew, Halapet doesn't speak a very complicated Hebrew, so if you can get by with Hebrew, he gave a few interesting interviews. One of them where he talked about the religious life in Morocco. Another organization actually came in to film him professionally. They have about a 45-minute clip talking about the process of making Aliyah from Morocco to Israel, how he experienced it, how he left his family, how they traveled by boat, how they didn't want to feed him food because he wanted to keep Shabbat, and they tried to force him into not keeping Shabbat, going through France, coming to Israel, seeing the lights of Yafo, he was crying, coming to Israel, going to the yeshiva in Puat Yosef, and the older students making fun of him, so he went to the Ashkenazi yeshiva to Panovich, how his life was over there. Mamash, unbelievable things that he shares. If anybody wants the link, I'm happy to share some of these links with you in which he talks about his personal life. Send me just a text message after the shiur. So it says here, Rabbi Chaim Halevy, shekol echad mibnei habayit madik da'atzmo, and for those who have a minhag that everybody in the house lights their own Chanukah, pashut shekatan shegiya lechinuch tzarich gam hu la'adik u'levarech keyeter bnei habayit. So that means that a child at the age of chinuch, like everybody else in the house, would light their own Chanukah with berachot. V'yesh mi she'omer, and there is someone who says, shekatan shegiya lechinuch yechol lotzi achim b'virchato, that a minor who has reached the age of chinuch can recite the blessings for you. Ve'en lismoch ad svara zot, but it's not good to rely on this opinion. Ve'en katan yechol lotzi gedolim b'virchato, and a katan, a child, is unable to fulfill the obligation of the bracha for you. Someone just give me a reason you could think of why. Why not? He's lighting candles, obligated to lighting candles. Why can't he fulfill the mitzvah for you? We're saying he's obligated. So why can't he light candles for the whole house? We mentioned at the beginning of this that he's obligated in the mitzvah of Chanukah in a different way. His obligation is very good. It's in chinuch. It's not an obligation to observe Chanukah. And because of that, your obligation and his obligation are not compatible with each other. He cannot do this mitzvah for you because he's obligated in a different reason. Similarly, we have in Birkat HaMazon also that this would be an issue with a minor saying Birkat HaMazon for everybody else. There could be another issue. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not giving you now a psak halacha. What about a person who's obligated in Birkat HaMazon because they ate a lot of food and they're satisfied? The Torah says, V'achalta, v'savata, u'verachta. That on a biblical level, to be obligated in Birkat HaMazon, you seemingly have to be satisfied with the amount of food that you ate. But according to Chachamim, we recite Birkat HaMazon even if we just ate a small amount of bread. Correct? You might not be satisfied, you still recite Birkat HaMazon. It's an interesting question. If somebody who didn't eat enough food can say Birkat HaMazon for you, because maybe you have different obligations in Birkat HaMazon. Min hastam, you're both obligated in the same way. But there could be places where somebody is obligated in something biblically, someone else is obligated in something rabbinically, and even though they both seem to be doing the same action, they're motivated by two different reasons. Not yet, but in 5 minutes, okay? Can you hold it in? Yeah. Okay. Then you have to look and see, are these really compatible with each other? Let's try to do one more halakha, and we will go from there. Kehillat Sfaradim nohagim shebal habayit madik ad ner chiyuv. The Sephardic communities have a custom that the homeowner, he's the one who lights the first candle, the obligatory candle. ואת יתר נרות ההידור and the rest of the candles, נותן לבניו ובנותיו הקטנים שהגיעו לחינוך. He lets the rest of the sons and daughters in his home who are obligated in the chinuch to light the rest of the candles. That's what I do in my house. והנר הנוסף, and the extra candle, the shamash, יכול להדליקו גם קטן שהגיע לחינוך. You can give it to even a child who's not obligated. Why? לחבב עליהם המצוות ולחנכם, in order just to make the mitzvot precious for them. Really, we're aware, now the Ben Ish Chai doesn't agree, but we're aware that that extra shamash is not necessary. And because of that, it doesn't really make a difference who lights that candle. But the Maaseh, this minhag of lighting one candle and letting others light the rest of the candles, I saw the greatest of Chachamim do this. Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu, Ovadia Yosef with his wife, both of them. If you want to see a beautiful video, look Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu lighting Chanukah candles. And not just how he reads, not just about all the people who comes and dance. He does a lot of Kabbalistic stuff. So if you're wondering why it takes him an hour to make the bracha, it's because he's meditating on all kinds of Kabbalistic words and names of Hashem. But there's a section in which we recite Tehillim 7 times, you'll probably recall. And he recites one, his wife recites one. That's for the whole audience who's there. It's not just him. And that's a normal thing to happen in the house of a Sephardic chief rabbi of yesterday. Unfortunately, you wouldn't find such a thing happening in any home today. That's how in Next time we study together, we're going to talk about people who light Chanukah candles when they're guests by somebody else. Let's say you're staying with somebody else or anything like that. And then, B'ezrat Hashem, we will get into another conversation. We don't have enough days till Chanukah. Chanukah is already this week. Okay, next time we get together, we'll just discuss very briefly the laws of lighting Chanukah candles in the Beit HaKnesset, and then we will get into an Agadata concept of Hadaka Osa Mitzvah, not makes the mitzvah. Okay, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll have time. And if we don't finish this year, so the Geulah will happen, and we'll finish it with Mashiach Tzidkenu in Yerushalayim, B'ezrat Hashem. Everybody should have a happy Chanukah when it happens, B'ezrat Hashem. Until then, the classes, the last 3 have been on YouTube, so if you need to check them out, you want to review something, they're all on YouTube, and I'm more than happy for you to look of them over there. We've expanded many of our podcasts now, so we've added now the UK podcast to our Spotify and Apple accounts. So if you want to listen to some of those United Kingdom classes,